Why do they fail? I mean, one reason they fail is because they're vendors. They're not leaders, right? We get trapped into thinking our craft is what makes us valuable to the world. And that's only true to a point. And again, AI, hello, is a great example of where that's being disrupted. There's so much of what we do that we identify with. And if it's our craft, we're really in trouble because so much of that is replaceable or becoming replaceable. And I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to denigrate the awesomeness of craft. Not at all, right? It's our relationship to the people and the problems out there that need to be solved. And to reach into those takes an understanding of human relationships and business, all these principles and concepts. It takes an enormous amount of empathy. And if we don't evolve in those ways, we're going to die.
Welcome to the Daring Creativity Podcast, a show about daring to forever explore creativity that isn't about chasing shiny perfection. It's about showing up with all your doubts and imperfections and making them count. It's about becoming more of who you already are. My name is Radim Malinic. I'm a designer, author, and eternally curious human being. I'm talking to a broad range of guests who share their stories of small actions that spark lifetime discoveries, taking one step towards the thing that made them feel most alive. Let me begin this episode with a question. Are you ready to discover what happens when you dare to create? Today I welcome Joe Pilger, the founder of Forum and former owner of Impossible Pictures. He's here to discuss the journey from creative excellence to business mastery in the studio world. We talked about how creative talent alone isn't enough to build a sustainable business and why learning to master the business side of things unlocks the full potential as a creative professional. Joe openly talked about his breaking point, how it made him realize that asking for help can transform everything. He advises why hiring smarter people than you is the secret to growth and explains the evolution from being a vendor to expert. Why adapting with soul, not just following market trends, creates lasting impact. It's my pleasure to share with you my conversation with Joel Pilger. Hey Joel, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Radim, it's good to be with you. Thank you. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm grand. Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you about what you do, how you do it, who you do it with, and why. Because you're helping this ecosystem of creatives to actually enter the world of business like professionals. So, for those who may have never heard of Joel Pilger and what you do, please introduce yourself.
Oh my gosh. I am Joel, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Radim, and anyone listening. I introduce myself as a creative who I think all throughout my life I was a creative first, but then had a love affair with business and what business allowed in terms of freedom and agency and, of course, making money. So I spent 20 years running a studio, creative agency called Impossible Pictures that was in Denver, and it was pretty successful. It was kind of a big deal. After I exited that, about 11 years ago, I started helping my friends that were running studios, helping them purely with the business side, like helping them figure out all of the different areas of business. And what I'm finding is that creative excellence is like what starts our journey, but business is what completes it. It's what, in a way, fulfills it, manifests all of its potential. So that's what I do now. I run a community called Forum. I host a podcast called Fabulous. I host dinners, as you know, which you came to in London a couple months ago, called Fuse. And yeah, my goal is to come alongside all of the creative business owners of the world and help them unleash their greatest creative work by mastering business.
Creative excellence starts the journey. If I can ask you about that, because sometimes it's creative ignorance. I think sometimes we don't always start because we are excellent, right? Sometimes we are just unaware what we don't know, but it's that pure hunger, passion, idiocy, ignorance, I think, would you say that that's the beginning where we go? Because excellence is, I think, what we think we're doing, but is it really?
Yeah, I think there's a nuance there because I would say maybe better than excellence. It's like hunger, ambition, appetite, desire, because we all start off as creatives as I want to make cool shit. Right? I really want to make this great work. And you're right. We don't master it, but it is something that we find success in, and we grow and we learn and we evolve as creatives, and we develop this thing we call our craft, but that only gets us so far. And there's this classic myth that says, well, if we're just great at the work, everything else will take care of itself. And of course, that's where business really comes in and unleashes us to reach, I think, our fullest potential as creatives.
As you just said, like we start with hunger and start with that sort of beautiful naivety, but there's so much passion in this. But equally, I think as we learn in craft, we're realizing that the world of business actually really is the same amount of learning and crafting as it is with the creative work. Because let's ever think about it. Like when you start, the work doesn't come easy, but if you're lucky and if you're really good, the business comes through your way, right?
Yep. No, it's fascinating that you say that, because what I find is there's this season in our careers where as creatives, we grow and we evolve and we become really good at this thing. And I almost hate to say this phrase because it's very controversial. In some ways, it becomes easy as we start to enter the world of business and we say, I want my work to have impact and reach, scale, influence. These things we have to learn as business, this next season of growth is really hard. I've been on this journey for 35 years. I am still every bit just as much learning this mastery of business thing. So it's really quite amazing how so many business owners that I work with would almost say, it's the business part that's really so hard. Like once we land the job and once we're in production, doing the work and making something great, it's not easy, but it's more within reach. It's more accessible. They sort of know where to go and how to do it. But in business, there's like these infinite riddles that are never solved that make it forever challenging.
We've taken off this plane real fast and real hard.
Yeah, I know. We're at 10,000 feet already.
We are in a cruising altitude really quickly. What I want to go, I have written impact, reach, and influence as the next thing because, as you said at the beginning, you run your own studio, you run your own shop called Impossible Pictures. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
And once upon a time, you must have sort of strived for the same impact, reach, and influence. But how was your own journey? How would you say your own creative excellence started Impossible Pictures? What was the beginning, and where is the learnings that you're now trying to pass on? How did that come about, and how did you get your thrown in and turbulence of the creative business?
Oh my gosh. Well, the early roots were as a kid having two parents that said, do what you love, Joel, right? Just find those things that you really enjoy because you're going to follow those and it's going to lead you to really good places. So I had enormous freedom to pursue drawing, acting, painting, designing, coding, all kinds of things in my career. Music was a big part of my early life. I think it was in a big part of your life as well, maybe still is. And when I studied at university, Georgia Tech, a school of industrial design that was founded by the Bauhaus back in the 50s, I believe. So I got that sort of formal introduction into design and method and all these things. So then when I graduated, I said, I'm going to start my own thing. I had already done 20, 30 little entrepreneurial ventures as a youngster before that. And within a few years, I was doing animation, digital was starting to become a thing, Silicon graphics workstations, 3D animation. This was all brand new. And I said, shit, I think I could just start a studio. I'm just going to do this. And I borrowed a bunch of money from my dad, God bless him, and bought, a couple $100,000 worth of gear and went for it. And that was the beginning of Impossible Pictures. And that was a 20-year run where I grew from being this creative, wearing every hat from animator to editor, creative director, cinematographer. And then, of course, it evolved into running the business, being the president, business development, marketing, sales, operations, all that stuff.
You just said a figure that made me shiver. You said did you say $200,000?
Yeah. Like in today's dollars, the amount of money that I borrowed in order to buy a Silicon graphics workstation and a digital disc recorder and Softimage and all these, high-end software. Oh yeah, it was just ungodly.
I remember working with retouchers in certain capacity, and this is the mid-2000s, and they were reminiscing about some of the technology, which was like $1 million or $500,000. And you're like, what? How and what? Because sometimes you have to buy a new Mac and you spec it out to a rocket's power. You're like, what do you mean 5,000? That's a lot of money, isn't it? And then you look at back and you're like, yeah, in today's money, and actually in old money, this is basically like lunch money, compared to what you have to spend.
I'll put it this way, Radam, that through my journey, it was one of the biggest pivots that I had to go through, was going from workstations to desktop to what we now, of course, just would call the current state of affairs. Imagine if you had paid $250,000 for a flame and $350,000 for a smoke. and you're charging $500 or $600 an hour for this thing. And then one day it's a doorstop. And then I would go out and buy Macs and I would buy After Effects. And by my reckoning, I thought of it as basically free. Like I could walk into the Apple store and be like, I want 5 workstations with the biggest monitors, the fastest CPUs, and walk out paying 20 grand. I thought, well, that's might as well be free at the scale I was operating. Like that's nothing.
When you think about it, compared to what you had to pay at the beginning, this is, as you said, it feels almost free. So with borrowing money from your dad, how do you see now? Obviously, like you were more or less seriously in the business now because you got money to repay if you had to repay them, and you need to make money. So obviously you're working with the charge of like, okay, what is my hourly price? Like, how do we make this work? Did you do that? Or did you go, well, you know what? Hopefully we get some work. Hopefully we do this. Have I got a pipeline? Have I got this? Because this is a big sort of debt over your head. How did you balance out the money and business with the debt?
Yeah, it wasn't nearly as methodical or systematic as you described. It was much more of the former than the latter. And what it was I had enough scrappiness, bravado, naivete, there's that word, that I could throw myself at something in the industry, a connection, a TV network, someone in the entertainment business, somehow figure out how to get a meeting, hop on a plane, go visit that person, and scare up a job that might be, in those days, $25,000 or $50,000 was, of course, 3 times that number now. And I just kept doing that over and over again. And I said, I want to play at this really high level where I could do 5 and 6 figure jobs until somebody says, no, you can't do that, Joel. You're not allowed, right? You're not qualified. And that has served me so well back then, even to this day, because you realize people that are playing at these really high levels, they're just like you and me. They just went for it. They said, I don't want to play at this level. I want to play at this level up here. So it wasn't very methodical. No, it was just throw myself into it and go for it. And then when someone says, hey, can you do this $100,000 show open for us? I would say yes, even though I had no freaking clue how I was going to do it. I would say yes and then go figure it out. And that's how we learn and grow and evolve and innovate and all those things.
I think that was a sign of time. I know that people still claim, I don't know what I'm doing, but many years ago, no one knew anything. Really, like people were just hungry, people were excited, people were keen, people wanted to play at high stakes. But even though I remember hearing a story of someone taking on like a 300 grand job in mid 90s, and they were like, yeah, we need to build this in Flash. And the person goes, never heard of Flash. But they said, yes, we can do it. And they went and bought a copy of Flash and they taught themselves how to do it. I mean, this was sign of times, you know?
I remember when I bought my first Flame, do you know how much time I had to learn the software? I mean, there were like 2 or 3 manuals that were 400 pages each. My first job on that system was the next morning. I got the system up and running. The client from JWT, big agency, showed up like, okay, let's make my spot. And by the end of that day, he was walking out with a tape in his hand and the commercial on the tape. You want to talk about, there was no YouTube, man. There were no books. There was no tutorial. You were like, here's the manual. Here's this computer that runs Unix. Good luck. And wow, what a different era it was.
For those who didn't spend time working on Flame and reading 400-page manuals, what was Flame? Tell them.
It was a workstation-based editing and compositing system. It's still out there. It was, but the company was called Discrete or Discrete Logic, now owned by Autodesk. And it's like if you took Nuke and crossed it with Premiere and created this one system that was completely dedicated, but it was real time. So you could sit with somebody and it would render in almost real time, which was in those days unbelievably valuable because you could crank out a commercial in a day. And back then people would say, I'll pay you $500 or even $1,000 an hour, which in today's dollars, right? Double or triple that.
I mean, you definitely fit the element of daring creativity here. This is daring, you know, like, but I think we were just slightly more naive is the word. Just the thing, you know, because you got a job, you know, you got debt over your head, you got work, you got fire in your belly, you want to get this done. And you don't particularly question yourself. Should I not be doing this? Like, would you agree? We didn't really overthink. Well, you didn't really overthink it at that time, did you? You just got on with it.
No, I think that's, in a way, that's sort of the source of confidence that you eventually develop as a creative person, because we all struggle with imposter syndrome. And what you find is you say, yeah, I think I can do that, even though you know you're lying. But it will stretch you and you'll figure it out. And then when you do it again and again and again, so the next time that someone says, can you perform at that next higher level? You and I developed this reflexive, I don't want to leap too far beyond my ability, but that next level, that looks really scary and terrifying, but I think I can figure it out. And it's like 99 out of 100 times we did.
I know your dad was an airplane pilot. Is there a link between travels, exploring, in a way that was the first sort of magnet for creativity, like influences. How was that for you from the formative time thinking, I'm thinking because you mentioned the word imposter syndrome. Do pilots get imposter syndrome? I don't think they do.
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, I never sensed it in my dad. But to answer your question, I think at the time it was normal for me that while my friends would get in the car and their families would go to the beach a few hours away, we would go to the airport and fly across the country for a long weekend because we wanted to go see something in San Francisco or eat at this certain place in Chicago or something like that. So it was very normal to me. It was only later, it was really around the time when my benefits ran out and I couldn't fly for free anymore after college that I started to realize, oh my God, I have this enormous privilege and benefit. And I now look back on it and realize for me, it was absolutely integral into forming me into the person that I became. And I think part of my journey as a creative person, as a business person, is all wound up in those experiences of other cultures, having to be resourceful and adaptive, all the things that travel does to us. Yeah. And I also think it's maybe difficult for other people to understand too, that when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, this was almost like, do you know the movie Catch Me If You Can, right? It was that golden age of aviation where it was in a way almost romantic and just very different than what it is today, which it's more mass transit today. But I've lived through both of those eras, but yeah, it very much has formed me. And still to this day, I'm absolutely a traveler. I spend about half my time away from New York because like I mentioned, you mentioned, hey, when are you next time in London? I said to you, you got an excuse, I'll come next week.
Yeah, because I mean, it's our mutual friend, Mitch Monson, who's basically quoted you on this show saying experts travel, people move around because that's the influences that we get, because you can see a lot of world through your computer screen, through your phone. Maybe we find an excuse not to travel as much, not to see the world as much, because we think that we are very well connected and we've got it in front of our eyes so much more than ever before, but maybe that's given us an excuse potentially to hold back. And I can see you nodding and improve.
I know, I'm just waiting for you to pause so I can step in and say, don't even say those words. Don't even put that into the universe. What I often see that I find maddening is creatives, business owners especially, that will say, you can work from anywhere these days. And I in a way, I take them on because I say, I know what you're saying, but it's almost so untrue that I'm going to just be unequivocal. And I'm going to say, no, you can't. And the thought is this: yes, you can do the work from anywhere, but you can't get the work. Like getting the work requires relationship. It requires empathy. It requires study and thoughtfulness, walking a mile in your client's shoes. And I swear to God, the people that think that you are going to do business with people at a really high level, only working over Zoom, they're in denial. And I've experienced this so many times. I know I'm speaking very binary, right? Very, very strong terms here, but I believe this so much because this experts travel thing, I teach this over and over and over again. I've seen it just have such a great impact on people's lives. And it's part of this journey that I've experienced. And it's kind of my gift that my dad and my mom gave me that I'm now giving to the rest of the world, to my people. And I'm saying, I am going to drag you kicking and screaming into your bigger, brighter future. Will you please go with me? Let's go there.
Those people might have been the ones driven to the beach a few hours down the road, whereas you were flying to different places. And I think we get different backgrounds. We get different springboards to our adult life and our professional life. So that brings me to you, if I may, to actually say, okay, so you started your Impossible Pictures. You got your flame, you're charging your money, you're making commercials in the day. Hopefully they'll be good. And you're running a business and you need to start growing the business because you're realizing now yourself that, okay, shit, we've got the tag, we've got some clients. How do we make it work? Because you made it work for, am I right, for 19 years?
20 years. Yeah, almost 20 years to the day. Yeah, and I grew it to about 25 people full time, plus a couple hundred crew and freelancers, all this. I mean, the short answer is I always knew I had more potential. And I was very small for 7 years. It was one person. I had one employee maybe that would come and go. And about 7 years in, I started to burn out because I was really tired of, I want something more. I want to make more money. I want to produce work that is worthy of my talent. And I started to shift things into another gear. And it was, this is very much part of my story. I brought on a business partner, started hiring, moved the office into downtown Denver, and started applying some very fundamental business mindsets. And I'm emphasizing the word business there because it really had nothing to do with the creative part. It was the same creative that I was essentially method and skill that I always had, but I was applying it through business in new ways. And over those years that followed, it was hiring people, finding new clients, developing new offerings, expanding our expertise, getting out of the service business, getting into the expertise business, raising our prices. I mean, all these things. And it was incredibly thrilling. It was really incredibly thrilling, especially when you're doing work on a national level, relaunching TV networks, right? Creating national campaigns for brands, people that see your work on TV that weekend and they say, I saw your spot, right? I saw the thing that you guys did for the big game or whatever. And that stuff it was incredibly thrilling, not to mention the team that I built was 25 absolutely incredible people like Mitch Munson, right? For a couple of years was one of my creative directors, and working with people at that level, they are way better, way smarter, and way more talented at the creative than I ever was. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. You might want to redirect me.
I mean, I just like that you actually employed people who are way smarter. Because the thing is, that curse of the creative is, oh, I need someone who's as good as me, or I need to clone myself. That's usually the terminology for those who haven't worked out how to let go. Because when you let go, when you actually say, oh my God, I need some smarter people around me, magic happens, right?
Oh, big time.
How was it for you? Because obviously, like running your own shop and going 100 miles an hour, then saying, I'm burning out. What was the sort of the reckoning? When did you realize I need help?
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Lux Coffee Co., the first creative specialty coffee company building a platform to shine the light on emerging global talent with a mission to make a positive impact on the creative industry and beyond. Lux Coffee Co. offers exceptional coffee sourced from around the world through ethical and sustainable practices, and you can discover the current range of signature blends and single origins, coffee hardware and accessories, along with exceptional apparel at luxcoffee.co.uk. You can use the code PODCAST to get 15% off your first order.
It was when I was at the studio, I was all alone. I was working on a big year-end campaign for Ford through their agency, JWT, and the scene would not fucking render. And my wife is calling, when are you going to be home? When can I start dinner? And I'll be home soon. But of course, I have to hit the big freaking render button before I can go home because it's got to render all night long. This is how computers were in those days. And then it's finally 1 or 2 in the morning and I press the render button and I get this famous dreaded error called soft image internal error, which basically means this scene is not going to fucking render at all. And I'm like, I broke down. Like I had a meltdown. I'm weeping. I'm like, this can't be my life. How did I get here? How can I be under this much stress? And then I remember a buddy of mine had said, oh, I worked with this organization that really helped get my mindset clear called the Strategic Coach. And a month later, I meet Dan Sullivan. I go off and on over the next 2 years under his teaching, and I start developing the mindsets. And that's what changed everything. And that's, of course, how I applied it in the creative industry was sort of my uniqueness. It was my naivete being translated into our industry. And yeah, again, the rest is history, as they say, because it gave me what I needed to start implementing a whole set of practices that I now celebrate and teach and share with everybody else inside my community.
So here's 2 daring moments, right? So you were doing commercial for Ford on your own, but you actually did the other daring thing, which is actually you asked for help, which is one of the things that once you master that creative ability to blag everything and work it out and not be a bit of a samurai and ninja at the same time, you don't always want to admit that you might be doing something wrong. Or maybe I just need a stronger computer or bigger render button. But actually being that person who says, I need help, who can help me?
That's interesting you say that, because I've never thought of it in those terms, but I'm thinking of a good buddy I have who ran a studio that was a competitor of mine in Denver. We were really good friends. And I remember he said, I don't really want to work with the advisor, the coach, the consultant, because I want to figure it out on my own. And it's so funny that stuck with me because I thought, not me, man. If someone has the shortcut, just lay it on me. If you have the mindset that I need, okay, it's going to be painful because I have to open myself up. I have to share. I have to be vulnerable. I have to admit that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I've found that getting past that initial pain is really worth it, because all of us are going to achieve our goals and our dreams eventually. I just say to myself, well, if I can get there faster with knowledge, with training, with, I don't know, I have coaches in my life, right? This is just a big part of how I live. I have a relationship coach, the mental health and soul coach, financial coach, all these things. And these are all people that I say, I don't want to figure it out myself. Can you please help me? So I appreciate that observation. That's really interesting.
Well, I'm the someone that's, I don't know how to even say, like, I didn't want to shortcuts because I thought I can work it out all myself. Only then you realize you only to get yourself deeper in a hole.
Is it ego that's telling us, I just want to figure it out myself? Like, I'm cool enough, smart enough, whatever. Like, maybe I just don't have a big enough ego to always think I'll just figure it out on my own.
I don't think it was ego. It was just naivety. It was just basically like when you're so far down, you can't really see back up, and you realize I just have to dig myself up as opposed to calling for a lift. I think that was the difference. But of course, I was then told that there is an option that you need to take, and you get help, and you realize, oh, only if I knew about all of this sooner. I think there's a benefit, because whilst our previous generation, yours, ours, was very good at blagging and working stuff out and make things work and getting us to where we are now, building the foundation of the creative industry. Now, how do we do it better? Because as you quite famously say, what is the real reason why studios fail these days?
Why do they fail? I mean, one reason they fail is because they're vendors. They're not leaders, right? We get trapped into thinking our craft is what makes us valuable to the world. And that's only true to a point. And again, AI, hello, is a great example of where that's being disrupted. There's so much of what we do that we identify with. And if it's our craft, we're really in trouble, because so much of that is replaceable or becoming replaceable. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not trying to denigrate the awesomeness of craft, not at all, right? Again, as someone who was sort of Bauhaus trained, if you will, I get that. But it's our relationship to the people and the problems out there that need to be solved. And to reach into those takes an understanding of human relationships, business, all these principles and concepts. It takes an enormous amount of empathy. And if we don't evolve in those ways, we're going to die. We're going to be the person who, it's the buggy whip manufacturer, right? When the horse and buggies got replaced by the automobiles, we're going to say, oh, but I really love making this thing and I'm the best at it. And I'm going to double down and make an even better buggy whip.
Since we were talking about like spotting the signs, if someone listens to this conversation and says, am I really a vendor? What is the signs of you being a vendor?
I mean, I would say one indicator is that if your clients, your buyers, if they come to you and they've already diagnosed their problem and translated it into, we need you to execute this prescription called a project. And see, again, this is very seductive, because, for example, like ad agencies, they will come to you and me and they will say, hey, I need you to execute this project at a really high level, at a very high level of craft, right? You're a live action director. We need your very specific je ne sais quoi that you're going to bring to this, that craft. And we do that, and we make a lot of money doing that. But then as the years go by, wow, there's a lot more directors out there. Wow, there's a lot more noise and competition, and the prices keep going down. We can't charge what we used to charge. And this is this process of ephemeralization, which is the Buckminster Fuller word that I love, that when a client comes to you and says, I need you to execute this, I need your craft, it's like a red flag. It's a watch out. And of course, the antidote to this is often the simple question of, why do you think you need a blank, right? Challenge the diagnosis. This is the beginning of the journey into becoming an expert and not just being a vendor. And I can elaborate on that if we want.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting, because when you said like someone comes to you and asks you to execute something. So for example, that made me think of illustrators. Like illustrators, visualizers, 3D designers, they're very rarely involved in a conversation. No, very rarely is maybe a wrong statistic. Not half of the time, let's be on both sides. Yeah. Half of the time, you just get told what to do, what to make, because somebody else has already made that decision. So it depends almost on your position in the food chain. Like, where do you find yourself? How much of power, autonomy, freedom do you have to actually be yourself rather than providing a solution? That obviously we have proven until now that is possible to earn very well, because people need your uniqueness. They need that genius that you provide. But that's changing.
I mean, what's brutal is, I'll just say this. Oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble when I say this. Probably 90% of the illustrators in the world that have been traditionally been hired because of that specific look. There are clients that are saying, hey, AI, create me something that looks like this. And boom, it's really close. Now, part of that is, yes, AI is certainly replacing a certain amount of that work. Also, some of those things are, we wouldn't have paid someone to do this anyways. So it's not like there was a project that was lost. It's just that they would have figured out another way to do it. But nonetheless, I think you make an interesting point that when I think of really great, famous illustrators, designers, I would say in my experience that they are brought into the process. Like when, I don't know, I'm going to say the Olympics because my friend Mitch works on the Olympics, right? They are not coming to Mitch and his team after they've got it all figured out and saying, okay, make us the logo for Paris, make us the thing. There is this very early on, hey, we're looking ahead 4, 6 years, 8 years from now and thinking, and Mitch, of course, is no dummy. He's also saying, I'm looking ahead 4 and 6 and 8 years and thinking. And what are they doing? They're thinking about the problem. They're not worried about the project yet. Like, let's just figure out, ask what the problem is, hopefully identify what the problem is, and start thinking about it, solving it, diagnosing it, whatever, before we turn anything into projects. Projects are not really where the magic is.
This is really interesting. You made me think of my own personal journey, because once upon a time I was a graphic designer, I was an illustrator in advertising, and I got fed up with the system, how it was working. I kind of exited illustration at the age of, let's say, 35. I'm 47 now, 12 years ago. Because I hated being briefed by 20-year-olds telling me something, I need to do this, and that. I was like, there is almost like a resistance and barrier to actually do work that could be interesting. Like, there could be expression and we can do really good stuff. So I'll turn it upside on its head and I'll say, okay, I'm going to start a branding studio and we'll do the work I want to do, which is visual storytelling, but directly with people who care. And all of a sudden, what you found as a roadblock was an ammunition for amazing work, because you can have a direct conversation. So in your way, how you describe it, you've gone from a vendor to a visionary. We can take you on a journey that you didn't know even existed, because somewhere out there in that sort of high sphere, you got like people sort of gatekeeping, like, okay, this commercial should be this and this and that. And obviously, by the way, there's many people in check green lighting your idea. Whereas when you go direct, yeah, I think that kind of, I would say, is sort of aligned with what you say, from vendor to visionary, because that's just a small shift. Because when you think about it, we didn't have to do much different. We only sort of repackaged it differently. And I got more people on board and it was like, oh my God, we're having fun. And all of a sudden everything's possible because you're the one driving, rather than hoping that someone will, give you all the freedom.
I came into this backwards, because back in 2002, I think, my studio started working for Dish Network, which is this big satellite provider company in the States. And we just worked directly with the brand. And we said, I don't know, here's a cool idea for a character that could be the mascot for this billion-dollar company. Do you want to do some commercials with this little guy? And they were like, oh my God. And off we go, right? We're doing millions of dollars of work this way. Little did I know, and it was years later that agencies would come to us and say, hey, do you guys want to pitch on this project? Here are these boards, here's this script. And we would say, this idea is kind of shitty. What if we did it this way? And they would get so mad, because I'd like to think our ideas were better, but they were like, no, we've already solved the problem. We just need you to make the thing and follow orders. And by the way, we're triple bidding this and all this, and we're going to give it to the lowest price vendor, so on. And I start noticing this pattern. And I think the pattern is, when you are working with middlemen, gatekeepers, and you have that itch called, man, I think I could just go right to the problem. That's the moment called, I'm not anymore in the race to the bottom. I call it, now we're in the race to the top, because I'm going to get closer and closer to the marketplace, right? I'm going to work with the buyers, because the buyers are interfacing with the thing called customers. Wow. Imagine that. So there's this journey, this race to the top thing that I preach of, how do we do that? How do we create more value, move from vendor to expert, all these things. And this is what we've been doing our entire careers, right? I mean, you look at your career, my career, all of our careers, we're all on this same journey, I submit.
Let me close the door on Impossible Pictures, literally.
Okay, let's close it.
Your feet had hit the ground nearly 20 years on a dot with Impossible Pictures, and you're like, no more. So how did you feel when you closed that chapter?
Honestly, it's, gosh, it's funny. I even still feel the emotion of it a little bit now. And that's been 11 years ago. This is 2014. It made sense for me to close that chapter because it had been 20 years. Things were changing, pivoting. I was like, do I reinvent again? Do I merge? Do I get acquired? I don't know. And I said that I had this really big pitch. It was about a $1.5 million pitch. And I said to myself, okay, if we don't win this damn thing, I'm closing, because I just got an offer from a former client that wants to acquire what's left and have me come work for them, his startup and all this stuff. And we didn't win the pitch. And I said, that's it. But it was a 2-year grieving process. It was also a 2-year financial unwinding and getting rid of all the stuff. And anyways, I could go very deep into that, but let's just suffice it to say it was a journey of grief, but also a rebirth and a rediscovery that every business ends. Every business runs its course. You are way more than your business. You have a thing called a career, and even something bigger than that, you have a thing called life. And it was this amazing chapter, 20 years. But yes, it ultimately laid the foundation for what I'm doing now, which guess what? Way cooler, way more fun, way more meaningful to me personally.
When you mentioned the 1.5 million pitch that you didn't win, do you feel that was a sign, right? That was a sign. It's spooky because I can relate to how I scaled down my own business, because we had not 1.5 million pitches, but like we had 3 or 4, like almost like a career changing projects that were happening all at the same time, and none of them came up. Literally we were told we came second on all of them. And I was like, you know what? I'm so happy that never happened, because everything would be delayed by 3 or 4 years in my life, because you have to produce the work, hate everyone, hate everything. Because I think it's really important to put your hand up and say, who do I want to be in the room as? Because we have influx of new creators, new designers, new people with passion coming through and going, I want to be the next Spielberg or whoever, or next creative. But like, it's that thing inside you, because it's that purpose is the one that leads you. It's like, you don't almost fuck about it. It's like you follow that, because when you look back, you go, you can only blame yourself for not doing that, right?
You're going to love this little story, this moment. This happened a few months ago. I was doing a Fuse dinner in LA, and one of my clients is a guy named Chris. And during the dinner, he mentions to the entire table of all these other founders, by the way, I was the guy that Joel pitched on that last project. And everybody at the table is like, wait, his last, that $1.5 million pitch that he lost, that was you? He's like, yeah, that was me. And everybody's like, boo, yes, you're horrible, right? We have a good laugh. And he says, no, you have me to thank that Joel is sitting there.
And what was his story? Did he enjoy the work?
No. He was working at Fathom Entertainment, which was, I can't remember the name of the parent company, but no, he went on to start his own company. Now he's running I will call it a small studio, but a very badass elite. I call him a lone wolf model, and very successful. And now we're good friends. He went through my Jumpstart accelerator, and we just love each other because our shared stories are so interesting, how we continue to evolve and get to a new place in this career, in life. And like, it's really good that we let go of what was there, even though, damn it, that job so bad. And when we lost it, it was crushing to shut down Impossible and close those doors, but it led to something greater.
You sound very happy now. I mean, because I wrote these 3 words and I said I will come back to them, and they are impact, reach, and influence. I have worked out that when you want the world to love what you've created, you really already narrow down to 50% of people potentially liking it, potentially not. Potentially you even narrow down to a smaller percentage. Whereas when you stop looking for that external validation, and you say, hey, actually, what is there that I can help you with? Not being a backseat driver, but being more of like driving instructor. You realize that your impact, reach, and influence is so much greater because you speak everyone's language. So how would you summarize the 11 years you've been doing this, and how do you help people?
Oh, man. I love that you brought up those 3 words. I was thinking of Rick Rubin when you were saying just a moment ago of the older we get, I find this, Radham, you tell me, the older we get, the more we have nothing to prove, or we just get to be so comfortable in our own skin. People nowadays, they talk about imposter syndrome, and I say, oh yeah, I remember what that was like. Not an issue for me anymore. That was tough. That was a big deal. But when I started shifting into, okay, I'm going to help my people, meaning my peers. These are former employees that were starting studios, freelancers that were launching a production company. And I just said, man, you guys kind of suck at sales, or your positioning is just horrible, or you have no production method. Like, you're losing money like crazy. Can I please help you? And then I started realizing, wow, if I started helping all these people and I start traveling and I start connecting people, I start having dinners, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm now going to form a community. It's been incredibly satisfying to see. Oh, I think I may have said this at the dinner that you were at in London. It's like I get to relive my former life as a studio owner all over again on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, but it's like I'm redeeming it because the people that I'm helping, they're running their studio the way I wish I had run mine. They're having the impact or making the money or producing the creative that I always wished I could have. And in a way, now I am because I'm unleashing them. So I get to vicariously experience this through them. I mean, again, it's making me emotional because it's so, yeah, it's just it's incredibly special. So for me, this is why I look back when people say, oh, do you sometimes wish you were still running Impossible Pictures? And I say, no, it was great, but it ran its course. It laid the groundwork for what I'm doing now, which is just much more meaningful.
Obviously, this is a sporting analogy because when you think about it, when you get into the industry, your day is more like running 100 meters or 400 meters or a mile or 1500 meters. You run it every day. And one day you get really good. You hit that peak. You never know when you hit your peak because only when you look back, you're like, oh shit, I was already at my peak. And then you realize you slow down a bit and you're like, you know what? I don't want to run this anymore. So when you're on a creative business, you work out the length, the speed, the resilience. You work all of this out and you go, but I don't really want to run this, but I can advise people on how to do this better. And this is why we supposedly improve as a society, as a creative industry, because when you do it from the sidelines, you help other people to do this even better. That's why performance in sports is so much better because we know more about nutrition, we know about this. And I feel like when there's a hard data, especially in sport, people know how to improve. Whereas we still got these blurry edges to our creativity. They go like, you know, what is the best method? And technically there could be a template of performance, but we also get this, if we have obedient people who would be doing the thing as you tell them, would we ever be as creative as we are, you know? So I think,
Yeah.
is it complicated as I'm trying to paint it?
It's not. Here's another thing I would say is I worked with a number of consultants down through my years, and they were helpful to a degree. But what I really found helpful was when I started to connect with the community of my peers, because that solidarity, that deep, deep empathy, and you saw it at the dinner, right? When we all start getting into what's really going on in our lives and our businesses. And so it's not, the expression, if you can't do it, teach, which of course, I reject in my current paradigm because the way I think of it is, well, I'm not really a teacher. I'm not a coach. I'm not even really an advisor. It's more like, hey, I'm a founder. I'm on this journey. Perhaps I started 10 years before you did. So I'm 10 years further down that road. How can we keep helping each other? Yes, I exited my business. I'm not running a studio presently, but my hands are in the sausage of 4 or 5 clients I work with directly all the time right now. And believe me, in the details, right? Pitching the work, like getting the new opportunity, managing the new hire, breaking up with the partner, whatever all those things are. So it's this founder to founder thing that I find so electric. Yeah, powerful. That when a bunch of founders get in a room and they start sharing with each other, somebody has the answer. Somebody has bumped up against that and figured it out. Someone has the insight that we're all looking for. And I just love that idea of, yes, we are competing with each other and we're going to make each other stronger at the same time.
This is an interesting thought. We are all competing with each other. Has the industry actually accepted that there's such thing as a healthy competition and we can be cheering on from the sidelines for one another? Because someone else's success is actually all of our successes together. Because scarcity mindset is such a bitch, right? And when you think about it, like when you actually accept that someone's done something, what we get to see is the shiny result. But we, as you said, the sausage. Sometimes you don't know what's happened behind the scenes, and the project you didn't win is actually the project that could have been someone else's nightmare, but they actually got it done. So have we let go? Are we more generous to one another?
I'm on a mission to absolutely destroy. It's what Mitch and I call it, the prison eater mindset. It's a zero-sum thinking. Okay, it's they don't talk to me and try and get my secrets because you're going to use them against me. I've seen that attitude. It still exists in certain markets. It's really interesting. Like when I go to Chicago, I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. I go to Dallas, oh yeah, there it is. And I can explain maybe why. But to your point, I will just say 1,000,000,000%. When you compete with somebody and they win because they're the better fit, or sometimes we just have to be honest, they're better than you are. And I know that stings, but guess what? Everybody who is great at what they do, they didn't become great just because. It wasn't by accident. It's because they got pushed. The market demanded it. The clients had bigger scarier problems. Somebody else figured it out and they got the job. You didn't. Wah. I mean, the sooner we take this radical responsibility and say, man, we all as an industry, you're telling me the people that aren't using AI and all these really crazy innovative ways, the people that are doing shoots on XR stages and all this crazy, you're telling me they're not making you better, faster, stronger, more innovative, more creative? You're definitely missing out. So this is why we go to conferences and hang out with other creatives, is we're stealing from each other, right? Good, what is it? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Is that the line?
Yeah, I think good artists borrow, artists steal. I feel something like that.
Something like that. Was that Picasso who said that, I think?
I mean, it was Austin Kleon who said everyone's still like an artist. But you said the word better, and this is an interesting one, because you don't always want to admit as a creative that someone potentially is better, because you imagine yourself with the healthy mindset that what you're creating is the best it can be at that day, and it's potentially better than anybody else because there's a competition and you somehow see yourself that way. But what you said, when you accept that there are people that are better than you, therefore you can actually be inspired by the mix of everything that you do, skills, knowledge, business acumen, creativity, and say, oh, I can actually follow this formula and get better myself. Because as you said, I like the term prison eater. It's very good. There is a breakpoint. There's a breakpoint of like, how do you actually get someone out of this? But can it be taught, or do you actually have to come up to it naturally? Because
boy, that's a really good question. I don't know. I think maybe because I was never the best creatively. Never. I could draw really well, but was I the best? No. I could play keyboards and perform songs in my rock and roll band. Were we the best? No. And I've always, throughout my life, I think I've had some sort of a honesty. I wouldn't necessarily say I broadcast it publicly, but I've always known deep down inside, man, pretty much everybody is better than me. And that's okay because I can learn. And this idea of, you know what? I learned this climbing mountains in Colorado when I lived there, that as long as I keep going, I'm looking up at the summit and I'm saying, God dang it, that's so freaking far. But if I just put my head down, get back to the business of one step at a time, no matter how slow I go, slow means there's a lot of people better than me, faster than me. But you know what? I'm going to get there because I'm unstoppable. Because I have this desire, I have this tenacity, I have this, I don't know, all this stuff I've collected along my journey. And that's served me well. It just means, when you think that I'm the best, that's why I should get this job. I think there's some sort of denial happening there that doesn't serve us very well.
For more context to this conversation, you and I are working on your book. I'm your consulting editor, working on your project. And it's really interesting because I'm going to quote you back from your own book.
Sure.
And part of section number 4, the bigger picture, and you say, adapt with soul. And I think that's a blueprint for longevity. That's a blueprint for careers. Adapt with your soul. Because it's easy to adapt with a business mindset. It's adapt with the market, adapt with trends. But when you put your soul in anything that you do, there's no BS. You can look back and say, look, I've gone where the mind told me to go. So what you've been describing and the way you've been doing it and what you're doing and what you're working on and what you're putting out there, you adapt them with your soul. You put yourself on that journey. You allowed yourself to be on that journey with all the twists and bumps and all of that stuff. But that is ultimately 3 words that unleash the next. When you ask yourself, what do I really want? And you said, I realize I can learn. That was, again, adapting with your soul.
Yeah. There's one thought I'm having, which is when I use the word soul, I think I'm challenging myself and all of us with this question of how bad do you really want it? Because the word soul says this is existential, right? To create is to be human and all this. And what I often find is there are many people who purport to, I want to be great creative and I want to make a lot of money. I want to have a really awesome career, but they don't really want it as badly as the next guy or girl. And the people who really want it, they are obsessed. There's this inner hunger and tenacity. It's so important. And it's the fuel that, of course, drives us throughout our career. Now, this is where when we go through an era like we're going through right now with things like generative AI, where I'm starting to see the pattern. And I'm even looking at historical references. Like when I look at this example of like the Luddites and what happened back in the 1800s, I think of the arts and crafts movement, which was Morris. And there was this rejection of mass production, which was what? It was the machine of their day. What is AI but the machine of our day? And Morris and the arts and crafts people rejected the machine. No, we're going to double down on handcrafted, fine tapestries and linens and wallpapers and all this that, guess what, nobody could afford. Then you have people like the Bauhaus that come along and they say, wait a minute, maybe it's our job as creatives to imbue the machine with what it lacks, soul. Because if we give soul to the machine, then we take something called mass production. We democratize simplicity and design and function and, all the principles of industrial design that I grew up learning. And I think we're going through a very similar process now. So when I talk about soul, right, adapt with soul, I think this is the journey. How do we become more human? Because the machine needs us more than ever. Again, this is something I'm exploring in the book, and with your help, I'm going to find a way to articulate it. But that's the gist of the idea.
Joel, I think what you've just been so beautifully describing, it still goes back to those three words: impact, reach, and influence. You can't get impact, reach, and influence out of a machine, out of AI. That's just a tool. It's how you use it, it's what we do with it. I think those are the key components, because just like with everything, be it whatever, like that comes from something minuscule to be prevalent, to be mass used, we go past the peak. And I think we just don't know how quickly we go past this peak and we go potentially like back to normal with the ability of having something new, with the extra tool, with the extra ingredient, with the extra muscle. But I think the element of who we are, what we do, how we adapt with our soul, and how we go on the back and how we go on to create impact, reach, and influence. I think that's always going to be prevalent, because after all, it's human creativity for other humans, and that's how we make a connection. Because it's so easy to see what's been done with AI. It's so lifeless in most cases, like when pedestrians use AI. And I think that's why we need the problem solvers. The vendors probably exist, but potentially in smaller numbers, because it will go back to the visionaries actually say, you know what, there's the next chapter, there's the next something, and this is how we make some people feel something extraordinary. So yeah, I salute you for what you do, how you do it, and how you're helping these people to actually achieve something, sometimes against the all odds, because there will always be change. How you embrace change will make you or break you. And yeah, I'm glad that you are on those sidelines helping them to succeed. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. And I appreciate your support and being part of your story, you being part of mine. And I know this, right, that the world really does need the creatives more than ever right now. The creatives are the ones that are going to lead us into a better future. They're always the ones that are telling the stories, creating the moments, right? Creating those things that inspire us. And I think this is not a time for creatives to lose heart. It's a time for us to take radical responsibility and lead.
Amazing. Joel, thanks very much for today, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Daring Creativity Podcast. I'd love to know your thoughts, questions, and suggestions. So please get in touch via the email in the show notes or social channels. This episode was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinej. The audio production was done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bags Podcast. Thank you, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more accessible resources to help you discover your daring creativity, you can pick up one of my books on themes of mindful creativity, creative business, branding, and graphic design. Every physical book purchase comes with a free digital bundle including an ebook and audiobook to make the content accessible wherever you are and whatever you do. To get 10% off your order, visit novemberuniverse.co.uk and use the code PODCAST. Have a look around and start living daringly.